It's Tim Sheesa for TechSpot here, and yes, I am back making videos for you guys once again. What I've been doing over the past couple of weeks is taking a look at the iPhone 6s. Now, the majority of smartphones that I look at throughout my time as a reviewer on TechSpot are of Android devices, and that's because the majority of phones released in any one year are Android devices. But when the opportunity presented itself to look at the iPhone 6s in depth over a couple of weeks, I just had to take it because, of course, the iPhone has changed so much since the original versions, and iOS 9 seems like a fairly compelling operating system. First up, let's talk about the hardware. The gold body of this particular model, wrapped with that excellent wooden D brand skin, you can check out those guys in the description below. It feels really nice, and it's a really nice size for a handset, coming in at 4.7 inches with the display. Of course, you can get the 6S Plus, which is a little bit larger. Compared to the Galaxy S6, it's slightly smaller, and in some ways that's a little disappointing because the S6 has that slightly larger 5.1 inch display, and I'd probably prefer the extra screen real estate if Apple slimmed down the bezels, but overall the handset is light, it's thin, and it's extremely well built. It also comes with quite a few features that are great, and that is things like Touch ID, for example, which activates extremely quickly when you press on the home button. It also comes with fast Category 6 LTE for the first time and Wi-Fi 802.11 AC, and the brand new Apple A9 SoC, which, going on the benchmarks that I've performed over the past couple of weeks, is simply faster than any Android device you can get on the market. And that really helps with things like application loading and gaming, where the iPhone 6s is simply superior to anything, including the Galaxy S6 with that also quite fast Exynos 7420 SoC. While it's only 4.7 inches in size and features just a 720p class resolution, the iPhone 6s's display actually impressed me quite a lot, and we're seeing Android devices come out on the market today with 1080p or 1440p displays, but to be honest, the 720p-ish display on the iPhone 6s is just as good as these displays. And while you do get a slight amount more sharpness from something like the Galaxy S6 or the LG G4 in terms of that 1440p display, the color quality and the accuracy of the iPhone 6s's display, along with fantastic viewing angles from an LCD, really make this a very compelling display to use. Of course, if you're after something a bit more vibrant, the Galaxy S6's display does boost the saturation levels quite a bit, but for something that's accurate and also looks fantastic throughout the operating system, you really can't go past what's included on the iPhone 6s. Another aspect of the iPhone 6s that impressed me, and this really shouldn't come as a surprise to many people, is the camera. It's a 12 megapixel non-optically stabilized sensor on the back, and in terms of picture quality, it's definitely the best non-OIS camera that I've used. Something like the Moto X style on the Android front with that 20 megapixel non-OIS camera just isn't as good as what you can get out of the iPhone. That said, the Galaxy S6 and also the LG G4, which have that optically stabilized camera, do edge out the 6s in particular in those low light situations and also in video recording, although I am glad that the iPhone can now do 4K recording, which is something that it couldn't do previously, and also that slow motion quality is, well, it's unsurpassed as far as from the iPhone 6s is concerned. Of course, the iPhone 6s isn't a perfect device, and there is a lot of Android competition in terms of the hardware space. I still feel the battery life is definitely limited on this device, only coming in at around 1700 milliamp hours. It's not really enough to get you through a typical day's usage. That said, the Galaxy S6 isn't exactly awesome either, but you can get Android devices with higher battery capacities in this sort of form factor. So it is a little bit disappointing from that front. Also, the storage options are extremely limited. 16 gigabytes in the base model is simply ludicrous. There's no micro SD card expansion, which means you're going to have to pay upwards of $100 to upgrade to 64 gig or $200 to upgrade to 128 gig. And you can get a pretty decent PCIe SSD for your computer for less money than it costs to upgrade your storage in your iPhone, and I think that's a bit of a joke. So I really hope Apple improves that in the future, although I'm not too optimistic about that. And this brings me to iOS 9. Now, of course, this is where the majority of the differences between the iPhone and Android devices lay, and to be honest, iOS is, well, it's quite a good operating system coming from Android. There's a lot of polish put into the general presentation and user experience throughout the OS. Apps feel very cohesive, moving from third-party apps back into Apple apps because of Apple's strict developer guidelines, and there's generally a very smooth and polished experience. And that's one thing that you don't necessarily get on Android devices when they have OEM skins and other stuff attached to them. That said, I didn't think the app gap between iOS and Android was all that significant. Android apps have improved a lot since the iOS operating system first came out, and a lot of the apps that I use from day to day on Android are just as good on iOS and vice versa. A couple of niche product apps can be slightly better on iOS, but generally I don't think that's a significant enough of a reason to move from Android to iOS. Where apps were let down a little bit was in things that required Google integration. For example, Gmail, the experience on Android is significantly better than what you can get on iOS, even with the Google Gmail app. The search experience isn't great. You can either use Spotlight, Safari, or the Google app to perform searches, but it's not as quick as activating the simple search bar that you find on most Android devices. And I really think that Apple needs to improve the search experience, because I, like I'm sure many of you guys out there, perform so many searches on my mobile device per day, and it's a really crucial experience of having that computer-like experience in your pocket. As far as the general operating system is concerned, the home screen with its grid of icons hasn't changed significantly from the first version of iOS, and I feel like there's not enough at-a-glance information available on the home screen of iOS compared to Android or even Windows Phone. I'd really like some ability to see things like the weather and my calendar events without having to pull down the notification panel. That said, the notification panel in iOS is decent enough with that today screen showing you that at-a-glance information that really should be on the home screen. The notification section is not as robust and as well developed as you'll find on Android, because the integration of the notification pane has been in Android since the first version, whereas on iOS it was integrated several versions ago. And the control center, which you can pull up by swiping from the bottom, does include some quick settings, but it's not as versatile and as flexible as what you get on Android with the notification center integration for quick settings that you see in a lot of devices. Another main feature of the iPhone 6s, and that's new to this generation, is 3D Touch, and it was somewhat interesting to use 3D Touch around the OS, but Apple doesn't really make it clear where it's used, and I feel they could improve on that by maybe giving some tips on how to use it. And also, in many situations, it's just a long press. It's just a slightly faster version of the long press, and I feel like when developers start integrating 3D Touch into their applications better than what's currently available, we'll start to see a better use of that precious sensitive touchscreen. But for the moment, there's only a few useful applications, and one of those is in Safari, and Safari as a browser is actually quite good on iOS. You can 3D touch on links and it shows you a little preview of the web page. That's kind of helpful, and you can get some previews like that in other areas. But for example, the context menus you get on the home screen that you might have seen in a lot of pictures of iOS, that's not a really compelling use of 3D touch. And I feel developers, once they get their hands on grasping how to use 3D touch a bit better, we'll start to see some better applications of it. And finally, this wouldn't be an Android to iOS comparison video without some annoyances about using iOS as an Android user. Not having a back button is a crucial feature that the iPhone is missing. And of course, it was a design choice not to have that extra button on the iPhone's hardware. But to be honest, having to hunt through the on-screen interface of many applications, finding that back button, which can often be in a different position or include a different icon, is really not a very good user experience. And although the Android back button experience isn't always consistent, it's at least there allowing you to go most of the time back to the previous screen whenever you need to. And I really feel that iOS needs to maybe have some sort of developer guideline that says you have to always put the back button in the same spot. That would make using the iPhone a bit easier on that front. So would I say it's worth upgrading to the iPhone as an Android user? Well, if you are after one of the best hardware experiences, then the iPhone is certainly a very compelling choice. But if you're really ingrained into the Android ecosystem, in particular using Google apps, I don't think there's much of a reason to switch from Android to iOS, especially considering the very compelling options that are available in the Android space these days. So I hope you guys enjoyed this look at the iPhone 6s versus Android. There's full articles up on TechSpot.com if you want to check those out. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Hopefully we'll be a bit more consistent with our video uploads on this channel. This has been the first one for quite some time, and we do acknowledge that. Give this a like if you liked it, and we will catch you in the next video.